Chapter 7, The Prophetic Life. Our Bible reading is from Acts chapter 2, verses 16 to 18, and I'm reading from the New Revised Standard, the Anglicised version. This is what was spoken through the prophet Joel. In the last days it will be, God declares, that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Even upon my slaves, both men and women, in those days I will pour out my spirit, and they shall prophesy. We were going to watch Homes Under the Hammer, but a thought has been nagging at me, and I sit there with the remote control held idly in my hand. Jesus, I say, I have a question. I'm not entirely sure Jesus shares my enthusiasm for Homes Under the Hammer. His eyes brighten now. Go on, he says, with a sudden kindling of interest. It's about the prophetic life, I tell him, because the thing is, I'm not sure I've got one. I mean, we're all meant to show forth the gospel and offer an active witness to our generation, aren't we? We're supposed to give an account of the faith within us and share the good news with our fellow human beings. But in my case, there's a definite snag. Nobody's interested in what I have to say. I am a complete non-entity. If I started giving an account of the faith inside me, it would only irritate people. On the whole, I think they'd rather it stayed inside me and I left them in peace. And I can't do prophetic actions by helping refugees and the poor, or setting up women's refuges and educating orphans in war-torn countries, because I haven't got any money. I suppose buying locally grown organic food is a little bit prophetic, because it works towards the peaceable kingdom and extends the shalom of God. But that and going to church is frankly the best I can manage, and I can't always face the going to church. Am I let off the hook for living a prophetic life, or is there something I'm missing? Jesus laughs. Let off the hook? You wish. Yes, sometimes I had a longing for that option, but the short answer is no, you are not. So long as you have breath in your body, your mission on earth is not complete. So I look at him hopefully. Maybe I have a contribution to make after all in accomplishing the transformative purposes of God. You've got it the wrong way round, he says. You're looking at the bowl, not the soup, if you see what I mean. Looking at the fuel, not the flame. You're focusing on the circumstances instead of the active spirit. I have nothing to say about this. He looks at me to check I'm keeping up, and I just nod helpfully. I think my incomprehension doesn't escape him. If you think about yesterday, he says, what happened during the day? I consider this. Absolutely zilch, I say, but he's shaking his head. In the morning, he reminds me, you prayed for your mother, struggling with the uphill climb to the end of her earthly life. You can't see the difference that made, but I assure you it did. You held her in the light, and that's a prophetic act. It says prayer makes a difference, as so it does, always. You resolved to withdraw from the matrix of tricky dynamics at church, so as not to escalate delicate relationships into antagonisms. That's also a prophetic act. It promotes peace and humility, respect for your sisters and brothers in the gospel. When the delivery man came, you greeted him at the door, opened the door with a smile, asked him how his day was going, and remembered his name and thanked him. That's a prophetic act. It told him he's worth something as an individual. You spoke for God to him. And you fed the crow an entire sausage. Remember? We stood in the garden watching him fly back to his family with it gripped firmly in his claws. That's a prophetic act. It announces that we all belong to one another in the family of creation, and we are here to watch out for each other. The prophetic life doesn't mean standing on a podium at Hyde Park Corner, declaiming to the crowd and fielding the comments of hecklers. Not everyone is John the Baptist. In fact, now I come to think of it, one of him was probably plenty. A little of my cousin John went a long way. The prophetic life doesn't need a platform. It only needs the practice of kindness and a discipline of love. It doesn't even need to be seen or heard. It only needs to be lived. He stops, checks in with me again, and yes, I'm still listening. There's something else, he says. Not many aspects of the life of faith belong to isolation. It's a family thing, a community thing. The household of faith makes its pilgrimage all together, the communion of saints and all that. It's like an orchestra. Not everyone is the conductor or the first violin. In any given piece, the French horn player maybe gets to go pop every few bars, and that's their lot. You can hardly hear the harp with the kettle drums rolling. Or it's like a choir. The sopranos generally get to hold the melody, and you couldn't ignore the tenors if you wanted to. Maybe you're an alto, filling in the harmony, or the bass, underpinning the thing. But nobody who knows anything about symphonies or choral music would make the mistake of sending the altos and the second bassoon back home. Are they part of it? Do they make a difference? You bet. Nobody has to do the whole thing, and everybody's contribution is part of the music. The church is not all about the preacher and the organist. The person who prepared the notices sheet and the person who handed it to you with a smile as you came in, they are just as important. When the Spirit was poured out on all flesh at Pentecost, we moved on from the days of the solo prophet. The prophetic life is seen in the whole people of God. And even if all you do is play the triangle in this grand orchestration, that does mean you as well. You're hired. You belong. What you put in matters. Every angel in heaven notices if you take the day off. As I take this in, my gaze drifts across the room to the clock on the piano. This is good news, isn't it? But is it worth tuning in to Homes Under the Hammer now for the last 8 minutes? Probably not.